Okay. I'm not going to stay behind there because Mary Frances has asked me to do something.
Okay, every time you go away, nobody can hear you that's on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll do it this way. Mary Frances has asked me to do something, and it's to kind of ask people what they know about today's meeting. So I've got these little pieces of paper. We got these little pieces of paper we're going to hand out to everybody, except for you because you already know. There you go.
Give me the.
Oh, you're going to hand them out?
You stay up there.
Okay.
Everybody got a pen, baby?
Yeah, you're going to need a pen. I'd like you to write your names on those pieces of paper. And then I'm going to ask you a question in a few minutes once you already have your papers. As Jim said, executive board voted me in to be, what is this, John? It quickly marks on my screen.
Mitchell,
Yeah.
some people are not hearing you. Some people do not have a piece of paper.
Right.
Hold your hand up if you do not have one of these pieces of paper.
Hand them out.
I'll wait.
All right,
Speaking loudly, that's going to be a challenge, I guess.
we need
What
one.
do you want us to do? We didn't hear.
Write your names on them.
Full name?
Your first name's good enough, I guess. Anyway, as Jim said, executive board voted me in to be Mary Frances' replacement.
Pen or pens?
Oh, that's a good. I kind of assumed everybody would have one. They were asking for pens.
New
They voted me in to be Mary Frances' replacement. So I'll be in charge of programming for the rest of the year. I'd like to ask some of you to volunteer to be on a committee that would decide what kind of programs we're going to see the rest of the year. I was kind of stuck shorthanded with preparing today's program, and so forgive me for that, but I didn't have, it was John's suggestion, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Everybody got paper now? Okay, here's the question. Oh, that's what I was looking for.
You want to go around front?
Yeah.
No,
You still can't hear on Zoom though, right? This will help these guys, but,
we can hear you.
okay. You remember the old days, all right, when we had the club meetings, there was a thing where you get a free door prize ticket if you knew the password code name that they put on our webpage. Remember that? I don't think they've been doing that for a while. But instead of that, today, don't cheat and look at your neighbors, but just yourself. If you remember what today's programming topic is, write that down on your piece of paper. And don't cheat. Write down on a piece of paper what today's programming topic is. We send it out by mass email. I posted it on Facebook, both the group and the page. So you've been told. The trick is, do you know what it is? If you do, we're going to give you a free door prize ticket. Okay? Everybody got it written down?
David, is it on? We aren't hearing anything from the speakers.
He's got to hold it up.
I got it, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway, is everybody finished?
Oh, that's better.
Oh, okay. Did you hear me? I said you want to write down what today's topic is, what the presentation is about. If you know, write it down on paper. Because we're going to give you a free door prize ticket if you're right. Everybody done? Okay. Okay, the topic for today is data privacy. If you got that right, give your piece of paper to Davey. I guess he can come around and collect them, and he'll give you a free ticket. How's that?
I'll give him the ticket.
Daniel, he did not want you to take on the rest of
John, do you have any idea why I'm seeing squiggly lines on my screen? They look like,
Because you squiggled on them. You squiggled on your computer.
You forget
I
that.
did.
I saw it.
I'm ready to erase that.
Why can't
You
we
can use the touchpad too, I guess. Oh, the invitation thing.
I think you should collect the papers.
For your alternates.
Hand out the
There you go.
later.
Well, thank you. It's helping me with Zoom because I've never used it before.
Davey.
This should be good. Yeah, all right, cool. Okay, what else? Besides, like I said, if you want to volunteer to be on the committee to help me decide programming topics, please give me your name and your email address during the meeting or after the meeting today, and I'll contact you. Right now, I'm kind of looking at John and Jim and Mary Francis as my committee, but I'd like to have more. He's retired. What else? Of course, I'm also been appointed the chairman of the social media thing. So right now, as far as I know, John, we have only got Facebook. That's it, right? Do we have anything else like Twitter?
Yes, we have other things.
Do we?
Which I'll talk to you about.
Okay, later. Okay. I'd like to expand that beyond Facebook if we could.
We do.
Okay. That's it. Okay, some of the ideas I had, Jim asked for this. Now, I wrote these down actually after the executive board meeting. Or maybe I already had them. But anyway, some of the topics I had in mind were net neutrality as a subject, artificial intelligence, how artificial intelligence affects us in our daily lives already, smart cars, that's a good topic.
What is it?
Smart cars.
Smart car.
Yeah. Google's getting ready to come out with those
I know,
like
right.
mass scale here really quickly. Social networking sites and apps, that's another, of course, social premium is good with that. Windows 10, Windows Defender, and how that works. Video conferencing apps, which we're using one now on Zoom. There's other ones though.
We need to know more about the cloud.
Encryption, I had on here. I'll write down cloud. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, that cloud computing is getting to be really popular too. The other ones I had, blockchain currencies like Bitcoin. Interesting. Passwordification, which is coming up around the corner here, probably this year or next year, out of a company that Microsoft's backing now called TrueSoma. Robots, of course, are big, for manufacturing especially. I thought the stock market and high-speed trading would be a good topic, how that works, why we're left out in the cold. Open source alternatives to your main things you usually use. You can get stuff free as an alternative. Piracy is a good topic. Copyright infringement. Torrents, how to use torrents. The dark web. All kinds of stuff. I got ideas. So you guys can give me your ideas. And in the meantime, we'll start this. What I did, we chose data privacy because there's a, what is that hub, John, for this, that started the whole thing.
National something or other.
Yeah, national something or other. Anyway, it's a National Data Privacy Day on January 28th this month. And so we decided to do data privacy as a topic. I put together 4 different videos and I've created a playlist. You'll see that up here on the screen. It says LCCS Data and Privacy Program. These don't cover everything, trust me. They only cover a lot of surveillance type stuff. And some things regarding your cell phones. But there's a lot of stuff that deals with data privacy, and regarding that,
So you're okay?
It didn't, the tennis high right then.
You sure you're okay?
We'll know probably an hour from now, then she'll find out.
She's okay, she thinks.
That used to be bang.
Sorry.
it's okay. As long as she's all right. So anyway, like I said, the videos don't cover everything. What I did was I created a handout that I'll hand out here in a minute and have you guys pass it around. And it covers some of the other stuff, but again, it's too much to go into a lot of detail. So what I have on there is links that you can click on. Now, of course, you can't click on the links on your paper, but I have uploaded that same handout to Google Docs and made it public. So I'll make sure you guys can have access to that and you can click on the links from there. Okay, so without further ado, we'll do this. guys talk for me. And I'm going to ask you, please hold your questions till the end, of course, because I'm going to get back up here until it's over.
The shocking police crackdown on protesters in Ferguson, Missouri, in the wake of the police shooting of Michael Brown, underscored the extent to which advanced military weapons and equipment designed for the battlefield are making their way to small-town police departments across the United States. Although much tougher to observe, the same thing is happening with surveillance equipment. NSA-style mass surveillance is enabling local police departments to gather vast quantities of sensitive information about each and every one of us in a way that was never previously possible. Location information can be very sensitive. If you drive your car around the United States, it can reveal if you go to a therapist, attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, if you go to church, or if you don't go to church. And when that information about you is combined with the same information about everyone else, the government can gain a detailed portrait of how private citizens interact. This information used to be private. Thanks to modern technology, the government knows far too much about what happens behind closed doors, and local police departments make decisions about who they think you are based on this information. One of the key technologies driving mass location tracking is the innocuous-sounding automatic license plate reader. If you haven't seen one, it's probably because you didn't know what to look for. They're everywhere. Mounted on roads or on police cars, automatic license plate readers capture images of every passing car and convert the license plate into machine-readable text so that they can be checked against hot lists of cars potentially wanted for wrongdoing. But more than that, increasingly, local police departments are keeping records not just of people wanted for wrongdoing, but of every plate that passes them by, resulting in the collection of mass quantities of data about where Americans have gone. Did you know this was happening? When Mike Katz-LaCave asked his local police department for information about the plate reader data they had on him, this is what they got. In addition to the date, time, and location, the police department had photographs that captured where he was going and often who he was with. The second photo from the top is a picture of Mike and his two daughters getting out of their car in their own driveway. The government has hundreds of photos like this about Mike going about his daily life. And if you drive a car in the United States, I would bet money that they have photographs like this of you going about your daily life. Mike hasn't done anything wrong. Why is it okay that the government is keeping all of this information? The reason it's happening is because as the cost of storing this data has plummeted, the police departments simply hang on to it just in case it could be useful someday. The issue is not just that one police department is gathering this information in isolation, or even that multiple police departments are doing it. At the same time, the federal government is collecting all of these individual pots of data and pooling them together into one vast database with hundreds of millions of hits showing where Americans have traveled. This document from the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, which is one of the agencies primarily interested in this, is one of several that reveal the existence of this database. Meanwhile, in New York City, the NYPD has driven police cars equipped with license plate readers past mosques in order to figure out who is attending. The uses and abuses of this technology aren't limited to the United States. In the UK, the police department put 80-year-old John Pat on a plate reader watch list after he had attended dozens of lawful political demonstrations where he liked to sit on a bench and sketch the attendees. License plate readers aren't the only mass location tracking technology available to law enforcement agents today. Through a technique known as a cell tower dump, law enforcement agents can uncover who was using one or more cell towers at a particular time, a technique which has been known to reveal the location of tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of people. Also, using a device known as a Stingray, law enforcement agents can send tracking signals inside people's houses to identify the cell phones located there. And if they don't know which house to target, they've been known to drive this technology around through whole neighborhoods. Just as the police in Ferguson possess high-tech military weapons and equipment, so too do police departments across the United States possess high-tech surveillance gear. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. The question is, what should we do about this? I think this poses a serious civil liberties threat. History has shown that once the police have massive quantities of data tracking the movements of innocent people, it gets abused, maybe for blackmail, maybe for political advantage, or maybe for simple voyeurism. Fortunately, there are steps we can take. Local police departments can be governed by the city councils, which can pass laws requiring the police to dispose of the data about innocent people while allowing the legitimate uses of the technology to go forward. Thank you.
For more than 100 years, the telephone companies have provided wiretapping assistance to governments. For much of this time, this assistance was manual. Surveillance took place manually, and wires were connected by hand, calls were recorded to tape. But as in so many other industries, computing has changed everything. The telephone companies built surveillance features into the very core of their networks. I want that to sink in for a second. Our telephones and the networks that carry our calls were wired for surveillance first and foremost. So what that means is that when you're talking to your spouse, your children, a colleague, or your doctor on the telephone, someone could be listening. Now that someone might be your own government, they could also be another government, a foreign intelligence service, or a hacker, or a criminal, or a stalker, or any other party that breaks into the surveillance system, that hacks in to the surveillance system of the telephone companies. But while the telephone companies have built surveillance as a priority, Silicon Valley companies have not. And increasingly over the last couple of years, Silicon Valley companies have built strong encryption technology into their communications products that make surveillance extremely difficult. For example, many of you might have an iPhone, and if you use an iPhone to send a text message to other people who have an iPhone, those text messages cannot easily be wiretapped. And in fact, according to Apple, they're not able to even see the text messages themselves. Likewise, if you use FaceTime to make an audio call or a video call with one of your friends or loved ones, that too cannot be easily wiretapped. And it's not just Apple. WhatsApp, which is now owned by Facebook and used by hundreds of millions of people around the world, also has built strong encryption technology into its product, which means that people in the global south can easily communicate without their governments, often authoritarian, wiretapping their text messages. So, after 100 years of being able to listen to any telephone call, anytime, anywhere, you might imagine that government officials are not very happy. And in fact, that's what's happening. Government officials are extremely mad, and they're not mad because these encryption tools are now available. What upsets them the most is that the tech companies have built encryption features into their products and turn them on by default. It's the default piece that matters. In short, the tech companies have democratized encryption. And so, government officials like British Prime Minister David Cameron, they believe that all communications, emails, texts, voice calls, all of these should be available to governments. And encryption is making that difficult. Now look, I'm extremely sympathetic to their point of view. We live in a dangerous time, in a dangerous world, and there really are bad people out there. There are terrorists and other serious national security threats that I suspect we all want the FBI and the NSA to monitor. But those surveillance features come at a cost. The reason for that is that there's no such thing as a terrorist laptop or a drug dealer's cell phone. We all use the same communications devices What that means is that if the drug dealer's telephone calls or the terrorist telephone calls can be intercepted, then so can the rest of ours too. And I think we really need to ask, should a billion people around the world be using devices that are wiretap friendly? So the scenario of hacking of surveillance systems that I've described, this is not imaginary. In 2009, the surveillance systems that Google and Microsoft built into their networks, the systems that they use to respond to lawful surveillance requests from the police, those systems were compromised by the Chinese government because the Chinese government wanted to figure out which of their own agents the US government was monitoring. By the same token, in 2004, the surveillance system built to the network of Vodafone Greece, Greece's largest telephone company, was compromised by an unknown entity. And that feature, the surveillance feature, was used to wiretap the Greek Prime Minister and members of the Greek cabinet. The foreign government or hackers who did that were never caught. And really this gets to the very problem with these surveillance features or backdoors. When you build a backdoor into a communications network or a piece of technology, you have no way of controlling who's going to go through it. You have no way of controlling whether it will be used by your side or the other side, by good guys or by bad guys. And so for that reason, I think that it's better to build networks to be as secure as possible. Yes, this means that in the future, encryption is going to make wiretapping more difficult. It means that the police are going to have a tougher time catching bad guys. But the alternative would mean to live in a world where anyone's calls or anyone's text messages could be surveilled by criminals, by stalkers, and by foreign intelligence agencies. And I don't want to live in that kind of world. And so right now, you probably have the tools to thwart many kinds of government surveillance already on your phones and already in your pockets. You just might not realize how strong and how secure those tools are, or how weak the other ways you can use to communicate really are. And so my message to you is this. We need to use these tools. We need to secure our telephone calls. We need to secure our text messages. I want you to use these tools. I want you to tell your loved ones. I want you to tell your colleagues. Use these encrypted communications tools. Don't just use them because they're cheap and easy, but use them because they're secure. Thank you.
Years ago, scientists at CERN created the World Wide Web. Since then, the internet has transformed the way we communicate, the way we do business, and even the way we live. In many ways, the ideas that gave birth to Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so many others have now really transformed our lives. And this has brought us many real benefits, such as a more connected society. However, there are also some downsides to this. Today, the average person has an astounding amount of personal information online. And we add to this online information every single time we post on Facebook, each time we search on Google, and each time we send an email. Now many of us probably think, well, one email, there's nothing in there, right? But if you consider a year's worth of emails, or maybe even a lifetime of email, collectively this tells a lot. It tells who we have been, who we have met, and in many ways, even what we're thinking about. And the more scary part about this is our data now lasts forever. So your data can and will outlive you. What has happened is that we've largely lost control over our data and also our privacy. So this year, as the web turns 25, it's very important for us to take a moment and think about the implications of this. We have to really think. We've lost privacy, yes. But actually what we've also lost is the idea of privacy itself. If you think about it, most of us here today probably remember what life was like before the internet. But today, there's a new generation that is being taught from a very young age to share everything online. And this is a generation that is not going to remember when data was private. So if we keep going down this road, 20 years from now, The word privacy is going to have a completely different meaning from what it means to you and I. So it's time for us to take a moment and think, is there anything we can do about this? And I believe there is. Let's take a look at one of the most widely used forms of communication in the world today, email. Before the invention of email, we largely communicated using letters. And the process was quite simple. You would first start by writing your message on a piece of paper. Then you place it into a sealed envelope, and from there, you would go ahead and send it after you put a stamp and address on it. Unfortunately, today, when we actually send an email, we're not sending a letter. What you're sending, in many ways, is actually a postcard. And it's a postcard in the sense that everybody that sees it, from the time it leaves your computer to when it gets the recipient, can actually read the entire contents. So, the solution to this has been known for some time, and there's many attempts to do it. The most basic solution is to use encryption. And the idea is quite simple. First, you encrypt the connection between your computer and the email server. Then you also encrypt the data as it sits on the server itself. But there's a problem with this, and that is the email servers also hold the encryption keys. So now you have a really big lock with a key placed right next to it. But not only that, any government could lawfully ask for and take the key to your data. And this is all without you being aware of it. So the way we fix this problem is actually relatively easy, in principle. You give everybody their own keys, and then you make sure the server doesn't actually have the keys. This seems like common sense, right? So the question that comes up is, why hasn't this been done yet? Well, if you really think about it, we see that the business model of the internet today really isn't compatible with privacy. Just take a look at some of the biggest names on the web, and you see that advertising plays a huge role. In fact, this year alone, advertising is $137 billion. And to optimize the ads that are shown to us, companies have to know everything about us. They need to know where we live, how old we are, what we like, what we don't like, and anything else they can get their hands on. And if you think about it, the best way to get this information is really just invade our privacy. So these companies aren't going to give us our privacy. If we want to have privacy online, what we have to do is we've got to go out and get it ourselves. For many years, when it came to email, the only solution was something known as PGP, which was quite complicated and only accessible to the tech savvy. Here's a diagram that basically shows the process for encrypting and decrypting messages. So needless to say, this is not a solution for everybody. And this actually is part of the problem. Because if you think about communication, by definition, it involves having someone to communicate with. So while PGP does a great job of what it's designed to do, for the people out there that can't understand how to use it, the option to communicate privately simply does not exist. And this is a problem that we need to solve. So if we want to have privacy online, the only way we can succeed is to get the whole world on board. And this is only possible if we bring down the barrier to entry. I think this is actually the key challenge that lies for the tech community. What we really have to do is work and make privacy more accessible. So last summer, when the Edward Snowden story came out, several colleagues and I decided to see if we could make this happen. At that time, we were working at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, at the world's largest particle collider, which collides protons, by the way. We were all scientists, so we used our scientific creativity and came up with a very creative name for our project, Proton Mail. Many startups these days actually begin in people's garages or people's basements. We were a bit different. We started out at the CERN cafeteria, which actually is great, because look, you have all the food and water you could ever want. But even better than this is that every day, between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m., free of charge, the CERN cafeteria comes with several thousand scientists and engineers. And these guys basically know the answers to everything. So it was in this environment that we began working. What we actually want to do is we want to take your email and convert it into something that looks more like this. But more importantly, we want to do it in a way that you can't even tell that it's happened. So to do this, we actually need a combination of technology and also design. So how do we go about doing something like this? Well, it's probably a good idea not to put the keys on the server. So what we do is we generate encryption keys on your computer. And we don't generate a single key, but actually a pair of keys. So this is RSA private key and RSA public key. And these keys are mathematically connected. So let's have a look and see how this works when multiple people communicate. So here we have Bob and Alice who want to communicate privately. So the key challenge is to take Bob's message and to get it to Alice in such a way that the server cannot read that message. So what we have to do is we have to encrypt it before it even leaves Bob's computer. And one of the tricks is we encrypt it using the public key from Alice. Now this encrypted data is sent through the server to Alice. And because the message was encrypted using Alice's public key, the only key that can now decrypt it is a private key that belongs to Alice. And it turns out Alice is the only person that actually has this key. So we've now accomplished the objective, which is to get the message from Bob to Alice without the server being able to read what's going on. Actually, what I've shown here is a highly simplified picture. The reality is much more complex, and it requires a lot of software that looks a bit like this. And that's actually the key design challenge, is how do we take all this complexity, all this software, and implement it in a way that the user cannot see it. I think with ProtonMail, we have gotten pretty close to doing this. So let's see how it works in practice. Here, we've got Bob and Alice again, who also want to communicate securely. They simply create accounts on ProtonMail, which is quite simple and takes a few moments. And all the key encryption and generation is happening automatically in the background as Bob is creating his account. Once this account is created, he just clicks compose, and now he can write his email like he does today. So he fills in his information, and then after that, all he has to do is click send. And just like that, without understanding cryptography, and without doing anything different from how he writes email today, Bob has just sent an encrypted message. What we have here is really just the first step, but it shows that with improving technology, privacy doesn't have to be difficult, it doesn't have to be disruptive. If we change the goal from maximizing ad revenue to protecting data, we can actually make it accessible. Now, I know a question on everybody's minds is, okay, protecting privacy, this is a great goal, but can you actually do this without the tons of money that advertisements gives you? And I think the answer is actually yes, because today we've reached a point where people around the world really understand how important privacy is. And when you have that, anything is possible. Earlier this year, ProtonMail actually had so many users that we ran out of resources. And when this happened, our community of users got together and donated $500,000. So this is just an example of what can happen when you bring the community together towards a common goal. We can also leverage the world. Right now, we have 250,000 people that have signed up for ProtonMail, and these people come from everywhere. And this really shows that privacy is not just an American or a European issue. It's a global issue that impacts all of us. It's something that we really have to pay attention to going forward. So, what do we have to do to solve this problem? Well, first of all, we need to support a different business model for the internet, one that does not rely entirely on advertisements for revenue and for growth. We actually need to build a new internet where now our privacy and our ability to control our data is first and foremost. But even more importantly, we have to build an internet where privacy is no longer just an option, but is also the default. We've done the first step with ProtonMail, but this is really just the first step in a very, very long journey. The good news I can share with you guys today, the exciting news, is that we're not traveling alone. The movement to protect people's privacy and freedom online is really gaining momentum. And today, there are dozens of projects from all around the world who are working together to improve our privacy. These projects protect things from our chat to voice communications, also our file storage, our online search, our online browsing, and many other things. And these projects are not backed by billions of dollars in advertising, but they found support really from the people, from private individuals like you and I, from all over the world. And this really matters, because ultimately, privacy depends on each and every one of us. And we have to protect it now, because our online data is more than just a collection of ones and zeros. It's actually a lot more than that. It's our lives, our personal stories, our friends, our families, and in many ways, also our hopes and our aspirations. And we need to spend time now to really protect our right to share this with only people that we want to share this with. Because without this, we simply can't have a free society. So now is the time for us to collectively stand up and say, yes, we do want to live in a world with online privacy. And yes, we can work together to turn this vision into reality. Thank you.
There is an entire genre of YouTube videos devoted to an experience which I am certain that everyone in this room has had. It entails an individual who, thinking they're alone, engages in some expressive behavior, wild singing, gyrating, dancing, some mild sexual activity, only to discover that, in fact, they are not alone, that there's a person watching and lurking, the discovery of which causes them to immediately cease what they're doing in horror. The sense of shame and humiliation in their face is palpable. It's the sense of, this is something I'm willing to do only if no one else is watching. This is the crux of the work on which I have been singularly focused for the last 16 months, the question of why privacy matters, a question that has arisen in the context of a global debate enabled by the revelations of Edward Snowden that the United States and its partners, unbeknownst to the entire world, has converted the internet, once heralded as an unprecedented tool of liberation and democratization, into an unprecedented zone of mass indiscriminate surveillance. There is a very common sentiment that arises in this debate, even among people who are uncomfortable with mass surveillance, which says that there's no real harm that comes from this large-scale invasion because only people who are engaged in bad acts have a reason to want to hide and to care about their privacy. This worldview is implicitly grounded in the proposition that there are two kinds of people in the world, good people and bad people. Bad people are those who plot terrorist attacks or who engage in violent criminality and therefore have reasons to want to hide what they're doing, have reasons to care about their privacy. But by contrast, good people are people who go to work, come home, raise their children, watch television. They use the internet not to plot bombing attacks, but to read the news or exchange recipes or to plan their kids' Little League games. And those people are doing nothing wrong and therefore have nothing to hide and no reason to fear the government monitoring them. The people who are actually saying that are engaged in a very extreme act of self-deprecation. What they're really saying is, I have agreed to make myself such a harmless and unthreatening and uninteresting person that I actually don't fear having the government know what it is that I'm doing. This mindset has found what I think is its purest expression in a 2009 interview with the longtime CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, who, when asked about all the different ways his company is causing invasions of privacy for hundreds of millions of people around the world, said this. He said, if you're doing something that you don't want other people to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Now, there's all kinds of things to say about that mentality. The first of which is that the people who say that privacy isn't really important, they don't actually believe it. And the way you know that they don't actually believe it is that while they say with their words that privacy doesn't matter, with their actions they take all kinds of steps to safeguard their privacy. They put passwords on their email and their social media accounts. They put locks on their bedroom and bathroom doors. All steps designed to prevent other people from entering what they consider their private realm and knowing what it is that they don't want other people to know. The very same Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, ordered his employees at Google to cease speaking with the online internet magazine CNET after CNET published an article full of personal, private information about Eric Schmidt, which it obtained exclusively through Google searches and using other Google products. This same division can be seen with the CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, who in an infamous interview in 2010 pronounced that privacy is no longer a, quote, social norm. Last year, Mark Zuckerberg and his new wife purchased not only their own house, but also all 4 adjacent houses in Palo Alto for a total of $30 million in order to ensure that they enjoyed a zone of privacy that prevented other people from monitoring what they do in their personal lives. Over the last 16 months, as I've debated this issue around the world, every single time somebody has said to me, I don't really worry about invasions of privacy because I don't have anything to hide, I always say the same thing to them. I get out a pen, I write down my email address, I say, here's my email address. What I want you to do when you get home is email me the passwords to all of your email accounts. Not just the nice, respectable work one in your name, but all of them. Because I want to be able to just troll through what it is you're doing online, read what I want to read, and publish whatever I find interesting. After all, if you're not a bad person, if you're doing nothing wrong, you should have nothing to hide. Not a single person has taken me up on that offer. I check that email account religiously all the time. It's a very desolate place. And there's a reason for that, which is that we as human beings, even those of us who in words disclaim the importance of our own privacy, instinctively understand the profound importance of it. It is true that as human beings we're social animals, which means we have a need for other people to know what we're doing and saying and thinking, which is why we voluntarily publish information about ourselves online. But equally essential to what it means to be a free and fulfilled human being is to have a place that we can go and be free of the judgmental eyes of other people. There's a reason why we seek that out, and our reason is that all of us, not just terrorists and criminals, all of us have things to hide. There are all sorts of things that we do and think that we're willing to tell our physician or our lawyer or our psychologist or our spouse or our best friend that we would be mortified for the rest of the world to learn. We make judgments every single day about the kinds of things that we say and think and do that we're willing to have other people know, and the kinds of things that we say and think and do that we don't want anyone else to know about. People can very easily in words claim that they don't value their privacy, but their actions negate the authenticity of that belief. Now, there's a reason why privacy is so craved universally and instinctively. It isn't just a reflexive movement like breathing air or drinking water. The reason is that when we're in a state where we can be monitored, where we can be watched, our behavior changes dramatically. The range of behavioral options that we consider when we think we're being watched severely reduce. This is just a fact of human nature that has been recognized in social science and in literature and in religion and in virtually every field of discipline. There are dozens of psychological studies that prove that when somebody knows that they might be watched, the behavior they engage in is vastly more conformist and compliant. Human shame is a very powerful motivator, as is the desire to avoid it. And that's the reason why people, when they're in a state of being watched, make decisions not that are the byproduct of their own agency, but that are about the expectations that others have of them, or the mandates of societal orthodoxy. This realization was exploited most powerfully for pragmatic ends by the 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham, who set out to resolve an important problem ushered in by the industrial age, where for the first time institutions had become so large and centralized that they were no longer able to monitor and therefore control each one of their individual members. And the solution that he devised was an architectural design originally intended to be implemented in prisons that he called the panopticon. The primary attribute of which was the construction of an enormous tower in the center of the institution, where whoever controlled the institution could at any moment watch any of the inmates, although they couldn't watch all of them at all times. And crucial to this design was that the inmates could not actually see into the panopticon, into the tower, and so they never knew if they were being watched or even when. And what made him so excited about this discovery was that that would mean that the prisoners would have to assume that they were being watched at any given moment, which would be the ultimate enforcer for obedience and compliance. The 20th century French philosopher Michel Foucault realized that that model could be used not just for prisons, but for every institution that seeks to control human behavior: schools, hospitals, factories, workplaces. And what he said was that this mindset, this framework discovered by Bentham, was the key means of societal control for modern Western societies, which no longer need the overt weapons of tyranny, punishing or imprisoning or killing dissidents, or legally compelling loyalty to a particular party, because mass surveillance creates a prison in the mind that is a much more subtle, though much more effective means of fostering compliance with social norms or with social orthodoxy, much more effective than brute force could ever be. The most iconic work of literature about surveillance and privacy is the George Orwell novel 1984, which we all learn in school, and therefore it's almost become a cliche. In fact, whenever you bring it up in a debate about surveillance, people instantaneously dismiss it as inapplicable. And what they say is, oh, well, in 1984 there were monitors in people's homes, they were being watched at every given moment, and that has nothing to do with the surveillance state that we face. That is the actual fundamental misapprehension of the warnings that Orwell issued in 1984. The warning that he was issuing was about a surveillance state, not that monitored everybody at all times, but where people were aware that they could be monitored at any given moment. Here is how Orwell's narrator, Winston Smith, described the surveillance system that they faced. Quote, "There was, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment." He went on to say, "At any rate, they could plug in your wire whenever they wanted to. You had to live, did live, from habit that became instinct, in the assumption that every sound you made was overheard, and except in darkness, every movement scrutinized." The Abrahamic religions similarly posit that there's an invisible, all-knowing authority who, because of its omniscience, always watches whatever you're doing, which means you never have a private moment, the ultimate enforcer for obedience to its dictates. What all of these seemingly disparate works recognize, the conclusion that they all reach, is that a society in which people can be monitored at all times is a society that breeds conformity and obedience and submission, which is why every tyrant, the most overt to the most subtle, craves that system. Conversely, even more importantly, it is a realm of privacy, the ability to go somewhere where we can think and reason and interact and speak without the judgmental eyes of others being cast upon us, in which creativity and exploration and dissent exclusively reside. And that is the reason why, when we allow a society to exist in which we're subject to constant monitoring, we allow the essence of human freedom to be severely crippled. The last point I want to observe about this mindset, the idea that only people who are doing nothing wrong have things to hide and therefore reasons to care about privacy, is that it entrenches two very destructive messages, two destructive lessons. The first of which is that the only people who care about privacy, the only people who will seek out privacy, are by definition bad people. This is a conclusion that we should have all kinds of reasons for avoiding. The most important of which is that when you say somebody who's doing bad things, you probably mean things like plotting a terrorist attack or engaging in violent criminality, a much narrower conception of what people who wield power mean when they say doing bad things. For them, doing bad things typically means doing something that poses meaningful challenges to the exercise of our own power. The other really destructive and I think even more insidious lesson that comes from accepting this mindset is there's an implicit bargain that people who accept this mindset have accepted. And that bargain is this: if you're willing to render yourself sufficiently harmless, sufficiently unthreatening to those who wield political power, then and only then can you be free of the dangers of surveillance. It's only those who are dissidents, who challenge power, who have something to worry about. There are all kinds of reasons why we should want to avoid that lesson as well. You may be a person who right now doesn't want to engage in that behavior, but at some point in the future you might. Even if you're somebody who decides that you never want to, the fact that there are other people who are willing to and able to resist and be adversarial to those in power, dissidents and journalists and activists and a whole range of others, is something that brings us all collective good that we should want to preserve. Equally critical is that the measure of how free a society is not how it treats its good, obedient, compliant citizens, but how it treats its dissidents and those who resist orthodoxy. But the most important reason is that a system of mass surveillance suppresses our own freedom in all sorts of ways. It renders off limits all kinds of behavioral choices without our even knowing that it's happened. The renowned socialist activist Rosa Luxemburg once said, "He who does not move does not notice his chains." We can try and render the chains of mass surveillance invisible or undetectable, but the constraints that it imposes on us do not become any less potent. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Glenn, thank you. The case is rather convincing, I have to say, but I want to bring you back to the last 6 months and to Edward Snowden for your question, if you don't mind. And the first one is personal to you. Is we have all read about the arrest of your partner, David Miranda, in London and other difficulties, but I assume that in terms of personal engagement and risk, and the pressure on you is not that easy to take on the biggest surveillance organizations in the world. Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, I think one of the things that happens is that people's courage in this regard gets contagious. And so, although I and the other journalists with whom I was working were certainly aware of the risk, the United States continues to be the most powerful country in the world and doesn't appreciate it when you disclose thousands of their secrets on the internet at will. Seeing somebody who's a 29-year-old ordinary person who grew up in very ordinary environment exercise the degree of principled courage that Edward Snowden risked, knowing that he was going to go to prison for the rest of his life, or that his life would unravel, inspired me and inspired other journalists and inspired, I think, people around the world, including future whistleblowers, to realize that they can engage in that kind of behavior as well.
I'm curious about your relationship with Ed Snowden, because you have spoken with him a lot and you certainly continue doing so, but in your book you never call him Edward, nor Ed, you say Snowden. How so?
You know, I'm sure that's something for a team of psychologists to examine. I don't really know the reason. I think that, you know, one of the important objectives that he actually had, one of his, I think, most important tactics, was that he knew that one of the ways to distract attention from the substance of the revelations would be to try and personalize the focus on him. And for that reason, he stayed out of the media. He tried not to ever have his personal life subject to examination. And so I think calling him Snowden is a way of just identifying him as this important historical actor rather than trying to personalize him in a way that might distract attention from the substance.
So this revelation, your analysis, the work of other journalists have really developed the debate. And many governments, for example, have reacted, including in Brazil, with projects and programs to reshape the redesign of the internet, etc. There are a lot of things going on in that sense. But I'm wondering, for you personally, what is the end game? At what point you will think, well, actually, we succeeded in moving the dial?
Well, I mean, the end game for me as a journalist is very simple, which is to make sure that every single document that's newsworthy and that ought to be disclosed ends up being disclosed, and that secrets that should never have been kept in the first place end up uncovered. To me, that's the essence of journalism, and that's what I'm committed to doing. As somebody who finds mass surveillance odious for all the reasons I just talked about and a lot more, I mean, I look at this as work that will never end until governments around the world are no longer able to subject entire populations to monitoring and surveillance unless they convince some court or some entity that the person they've targeted has actually done something wrong. To me, that's the way that privacy can be rejuvenated.
So Snowden is very, as we've seen of Ted, is very articulate in presenting and portraying himself as a defender of democratic values and democratic principles. But then many people really find it difficult to believe that those are his only motivations. They find difficult to believe that there was no money involved, that he didn't sell some of those secrets even to China and to Russia, which are clearly not the best friends of the United States right now. And I'm sure many people in the room are wondering the same question. Do you consider it possible there is that part of Snowden that we're not seeing yet?
No, I consider that absurd and idiotic. If you wanted to, I know you're just playing devil's advocate, but you know, if you wanted to sell secrets to another country, which he could have done and become extremely rich doing so, the last thing you would do is take those secrets and give them to journalists and ask journalists to publish them because it makes those secrets worthless. People who want to enrich themselves do it secretly by selling secrets to the government. But I think there's one important point worth making, which is that accusation comes from people in the U.S. government, from people in the media who are loyalists to these various governments. And I think a lot of times when people make accusations like that about other people, oh, he can't really be doing this for principled reasons, he must have some corrupt, nefarious reason, they're saying a lot more about themselves than they are the target of their accusations, because those people, the ones who make that accusation, they themselves never act for any reason other than corrupt reasons. So they assume that everybody else is plagued by the same disease of soullessness as they are. And so that's the assumption.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's good.
Thank you.
That was great.
Okay. I'm not an expert on privacy issues, but I'll take questions if you guys have any. Try to clear some things up maybe. One, I'd like to ask John, in particular, he switched to Proton Mail recently, I suppose, or maybe you've had it a while. Maybe you could say something about Proton Mail since you're using it and have been.
Well, the statement would be that those of us who are in the club that do it, and there's a few of us, that when we communicate, our emails are encrypted, private, for our eyes only. If I would send you one, I can send it encrypted, and you couldn't read it until you had the key to unlock it, so you could see it. It's a matter of my business between me and Ken. And so I send Ken something, Ken is the only one that reads it. And Ken can reply back, same way.
I'm going to create an account tonight, by the way. Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
I'm just going to let people know, Ira, John, and I think are the only three.
I'm not quite sure yet.
Anyway, we three use Proton, have been for over a year, close to 2 maybe. But it is a free account, just as free as Google, to sign up for it. They have higher levels of accounts that offer some extra features that none of us probably would use, but it is free to sign up for. And as membership chair, if anybody is authorized to get our membership list, say I have to send it to the president, maybe he needs the entire list, I will be sending it through Proton Mail, and he will have to get a password that I give him. So I have full confidence that sending it that way, it will be unintelligible to anybody except myself and the recipient.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yep.
Well, I'm just curious, you're trusting that other person, so if you forward it to them or send it to them, and they send it to someone else, it's still encrypted then, because they don't have a key to open it?
No, not necessarily. They could forward it to anybody public if they wanted to.
They cannot forward it as an unencrypted mail. They would have to copy and paste.
Yeah, copy and paste. So they could switch over to Google and send it that way if they wanted to.
But in between, the government or anybody else.
Yeah, you're trusting the other person, sure. Yeah.
How do you get the key? I mean, is it sent with that email, or
No.
do you have to send a separate email? Or?
I have to physically tell you or write it on paper and give it to you. I'm the only one in my mind after that point that knows the password.
Okay, now I've got email from John through Proton. How did I get it without the key?
Unencrypted, because I didn't want to take the time to make you go and unlock it, because I figured you wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Okay. So you can encrypt it or unencrypt it, you can send it either way.
Correct.
Yeah, Ken has sent me something without realizing it, and I get it, and it's gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, hey, did you send me something? He goes,
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
I'd be worried that that's like a virus or something, yeah.
Yeah.
If I saw all that junk in there and stuff.
The mail that goes, the mail that goes between Ken and me, it's automatic. It's
Because he already
automatically
has the
encrypted.
key, you gave it to him.
No,
No?
our keys are given to us by, Proton Mail.
Yeah, when you create your account,
Between each other.
it assigns you one. Yeah.
So I don't have to
If
worry.
if I have a Proton Mail, I automatically have your key?
If he
Yeah.
gives you his email address, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's only a key that goes between you and me.
Right.
It's only a read key, it's not a write key.
Okay.
Read only.
So if I send you an email, is it going into your old account the way you used to get mail?
You have to send it to me at Proton,
Okay, so if I just send you the old address that I have, it's just regular.
Gmail. Yeah, it's just regular mail.
And it's not encrypted. If I send it to Proton, it's not encrypted?
If you are Proton and send me a Proton, it's encrypted
Okay.
automatically.
But
If
we-
I send to you, I can choose to be unencrypted or encrypted. If I say it's encrypted, you have to be receiving a code to unlock it.
If you send Gmail to John at Proton, that's not encrypted, then he can open it, it just opens up normal.
Okay.
Your Proton account is normal.
Mary Frances, did you have something?
I was just going to ask you if you have to repeat each one of these questions so that it will be heard in the Zoom.
Oh, and I didn't know. You're right. I don't think the Zoom people can probably hear the people in the audience, can they, John?
Not very well. But-
Well, they were asking a lot about Proton Mail. That's what they were doing. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question,
Oh, another question.
a valid question.
Yeah.
For Proton Mail, is there a number of people in a group that's, before it's listed as a spam, or is there a cutoff number of people you can send to in Proton Mail before it's considered spam?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mary Frances asked whether or not Proton Mail had restrictions on how many emails you could send out at once, like in a group way, without it being considered spam, and they would just not let you do it.
The number 150 sticks in my head, but I don't know.
The only thing I can think of and look up is that the different levels give you how many emails you can send out, receive, per month.
Mhm. So the pre-account you get restricted pretty much, but later on you can pay for more. Yeah, I guess. Okay, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
If you believe in an omniscient and omnipotent creator of the universe,
Right.
just how much do you really need to worry about a bunch of groups that, whose members are only going to live for maybe 120 years at most, and who don't believe in such a thing?
That's a question for a theologian. Sorry.
What if you don't believe in theologians? We get that too, right? Oh, yeah, I know.
Anybody else? All right, I'll turn it back over to Jim. Go ahead.
Turn that light.
Oh, no, I got one more thing. I'm sorry. I remember the handout I mentioned. You can see the blue links on there, right? I told you I uploaded this handout to my Google Docs account, made it public. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link to that handout on my Google Docs account to both of the Facebook pages. So if you guys want to follow those links, and just by clicking on them, you can go to the Facebook page and get the document that way, and then you can just click on the links and it'll take you to those places. Okay?
Mitch, I don't do Facebook. Can you make sure it's on the forum?
Surely, John can, he's got control of that, but yeah. Oh, the forum, you mean? Okay. I think I got to count with that. I think I do.
Yeah, thanks.
If not, I'll give it to John, we'll figure it out. Anything else? Okay, I'm done. Thank you for